I would like to introduce David Hyder from Municipal and Financial Services Group, who will walk us through tonight's presentation.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. It's good to see some familiar faces. Good to be back. We're very excited about this study. I think, based on the discussions this evening, it's obvious that stormwater is a key issue here in the village. As Dave alluded to, really tonight we want to frame the issues. We want to provide some background in terms of what key issues, what does the stormwater system look like in Downers Grove, what are some key policy issues that are going to have to be addressed. And specifically, we first want to provide some background. We want to talk about why would you implement a stormwater utility? Does it make sense here? And what are some of the key issues as to why you would implement one? Next would be some policy issues that we would have to address throughout the study that we'll be providing recommendations for, but looking for input from the council. And then finally, our approach, how we're going to tackle this study. So first off, I want to provide a timeline in terms of what we're going to what the study looks like over the next couple months. Obviously, tonight is workshop number 1. As I mentioned, we're providing background, doing some overview. Want to talk about policy issues. The second workshop, we anticipate being the second meeting in September. And at that workshop, we want to talk about the level of service and magnitude of fee. So essentially what we want to talk about at that workshop is what are you providing today in terms of stormwater, and what is that costing you? What should you be providing in terms of the gap? And I know in the long-range financial planning you've been talking about that to some degree. And then looking, maybe an optimal level of service, and what's the magnitude of the fee that's associated with each of those to give us a feel for what that fee would look like. Workshop number 3 would be to look at some fee structures, actually implementing various fee structures. We'll talk about those in a minute. Billing methodology, addressing how we would bill the stormwater fee. Also looking at administration. How do we handle exemptions, credits, things of that sort. We anticipate that meeting happening the first meeting in October. And then finally, the fourth workshop happening in the third meeting in October, where we would provide our recommendations. So a little bit of background. You do have an extensive stormwater system here in the village. It's taken you 80 years to build the system that you have today. If you were to have to replace it today, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, so it's a very valuable asset. In terms of the actual facilities, you have 3 major watersheds, which include 11 miles of streams. 2/3 of the village is drained by storm sewers, about 130 miles of storm sewers. Within that drainage system, you have 7,000 drainage structures. The other third of the village is drained by ditches, which includes 140 miles of ditches and 47,000 feet of culverts. And finally, you have 315 stormwater storage facilities. So the takeaway here is that it is an extensive system. You've invested a lot. There's significant needs going forward, but you do have a very extensive system currently. So what activities has the village taken in terms of stormwater? You had a stormwater master plan completed in 2006. That study essentially laid out what maintenance activities and kind of framed the big picture of stormwater for the village, what you needed to be doing. And as a result of that, you have increased your maintenance activities significantly related to stormwater. Second study that was done in 2007 was the Watershed Infrastructure Improvement Plan. That really focused on the capital needs, putting capital needs within 3 categories: high priority, medium priority, and low priority, and identified hundreds of millions of dollars worth of needs within the stormwater system. So as a result of that, you did issue $25 million in bonds to address the stormwater infrastructure needs. To date, you've spent about $15 million of that. At the end of fiscal year 2011, you'll have about $10 million left. So the question is, what have you accomplished with the funds that you've borrowed? And we do have some pictures. These should look very familiar to you, as they were included in the long-range financial planning. But you can see here work that's done on Streambank, stabilization within Lacey Creek. Very attractive improvements done there. The Washington Park stormwater facility, which is a very innovative design. We drove by that today, and it's a very neat design, how it has multi-use with the park system. But the question is, are there still significant needs? And the answer is yes, there's still very significant needs. And we do have some pictures here of the failing stormwater lines, These are some of the clay pipe that's failing. Some of that was mentioned this evening that needs to be replaced. You have some very significant deteriorating creeks that really, from a safety standpoint, from a water quality standpoint, are key issues. You have delayed maintenance on drainage systems. You can see the erosion and the issues there. And finally, you can see here's a recent TV of the stormwater main on Washington Street, and you can see the excessive debris within the stormwater main. So that gives you a picture of some of the needs and kind of frames where you are today. But what we really want to focus on is the impetus of the study. Why implement a stormwater utility? And there's a couple key reasons. First off is the community is accustomed to managing its infrastructure through utilities. If you think of your water system, your wastewater system, around the country, that's how we manage infrastructure. And really, utility is comprised of two different activities. One's a delivery of service. You're providing a service, whether it's water, wastewater, stormwater. And then also it's the management of the assets required to provide that service. And certainly stormwater meets both of those requirements. You're providing a service, you're mitigating runoff, and you're also having to manage the assets. So it makes sense to manage it as a utility. Some of the benefits to managing it as a utility, probably the number one benefit that's discussed whenever you talk about any utility with stormwater is the improved equity. If you have a stormwater utility and there's a fee associated with it, the users who contribute to the stormwater essentially pay for the impact that they have on the system. Whereas if you have it based on the property value rate, there's really very little correlation there between the impact to the stormwater system and the property value. And also tax exempt contribute very little. Under your current scenario, there is some revenue that comes from the sales tax, but property tax exempt are obviously exempt from property taxes, so they don't pay anything into for the majority of the stormwater activities. So there's really improved equity there. There's also fiscal accountability. The fees are driven based on the level of service and the stormwater needs. And the fees are exclusively used for stormwater. They can't be diverted somewhere else. These two issues become much more important over time as you look at increased spending within the stormwater utility. If you have inequity within $500,000 of total revenue, that may not be as big of a deal. But as you move up and as you have to replace the system, and if you're looking at spending $3 to $5 million a year on stormwater activities, those inequities become more pronounced. If I'm paying that much more because I have a bigger, a higher valued property, but I'm mitigating stormwater on my property, does that make sense? There's a significant inequity there, as well as as you spend more money, the accountability there. Some other reasons, we always emphasize that it's very important to have a dependable revenue stream within any utility. If you think about it, if you have a dependable revenue stream, you are then able to act proactively versus reactively. So you are currently in a mode where there's scarcity of funds within stormwater, so you're reacting mainly in a reactive way when there's a stormwater issue. Just like you handle your roads, if you can act proactively, that lowers the life cycle costs of these assets. So if we know there's going to be a revenue stream, we know we can handle we can set those fees to generate the appropriate amount of revenue, and we have that dependable revenue stream. And then the last one, while it's we never want to get the public's attention with a fee, it's an obvious outcome of something like this, is it brings it to the forefront. You get the public's attention, and it provides an opportunity for education. We do a lot of obviously utility studies, and you can have public meetings till you're blue in the face, but you typically don't get the public's attention until they get a fee, to be honest. That's when you get the calls. So this does bring it to the forefront. It's currently unseen. It's in the property tax. People really don't know how much they're paying towards stormwater. And one of the goals of a stormwater utility is we do want to motivate our customers or our property owners to mitigate stormwater on site and manage it appropriately. So if they know there's a fee, if there's some type of credit program, it encourages them to actually manage the stormwater on their property. Another benefit is that you are regulated under a NPDES Phase 2 permit under the Illinois EPA. and you have the 6 control measures that are required under that permit. It obviously assists you in meeting those to the appropriate level, so having that dedicated revenue stream for that. So that's kind of the background in terms of why you would consider a stormwater utility and why it makes sense. But there's a number of key policy issues that have to be addressed, and we will address these throughout the study. The first one is level of service. What level of stormwater service should the village provide? Stormwater is a little bit different than water in that, if water reaches the house and it's high quality, your level of service is better defined. It's a little bit more ambiguous within stormwater. We need to identify what is the level of service that the village is providing today. And we know pretty certainly that there is a gap between the level of service you should be providing and what you're providing today. And the issue is, how long should we take to meet that gap? Is that something we should do over a 5-year period, a 10-year period, or over the next few years? And then lastly, in terms of sustainability of the stormwater system, we need to look at what level of reinvestment should there be made. We talked about this a lot on the water utility side. If the stormwater system has a 70-year useful life, are we setting aside 1/70th of those assets, and are we funding depreciation as we should? So that's a key policy issue. How do we handle reinvestment in the system? Another key policy issue is, if you implement a utility, how are you going to structure the fee? This is typically the hottest topic within a stormwater utility. There's a lot of approaches used out there. There's a flat rate per property parcel for all properties. There's a flat rate by property type: residential, commercial, industrial. There's actually some that charge based on water usage. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but there are a few that do that. Impervious area is the most common, and that makes the most sense in terms of direct contribution to the stormwater system based upon your impervious area of your property. Taking that a little bit further, you could do total area of property and then intensity of development. So there's some that do impervious plus with a lower coefficient for your grass, because there is some runoff from grass. So you can take this to an extreme in terms of the level of detail, but the most common is impervious area. Another policy issue is implementation. How would the fee be implemented? Should the fee just fund the gap between the desired level of service and the existing funding level? Because we do have funding currently from property taxes and sales tax. We know there's a gap in the level of service. Should the fee just cover that gap? Should existing revenues be frozen at their current levels or reduced over time? Should we have that fee become more and more, generating all the revenue that we need? Should we set a 5-year fee or set a 3-year fee, or should we ramp up the fee over time, year over year? So those are all implementation policy issues. And then the last set of policy issues is really dealing with administration. This is a little bit more of the details, but they're not unimportant, particularly within exemptions. The issue of, should there be certain properties that are exempt from a stormwater fee? Should vacant land be exempted? Should tax exempt be exempted? They're currently exempted as they stand today. Public right-of-ways, village property, which of these type of property types should be exempted, if any? Another issue is billing methodology. Assuming we implement a fee, how should the village impose the fee? Should it be on the water bill, on the utility bill? Should we keep it on the property tax bill, just have it separated out, or should you have a separate stormwater bill? Obviously, there's pros and cons to all of those. There's some administrative issues related to each of those that we'll go through with you. For example, if you use the utility bill, there's not always a one-to-one correlation between the utility bill and the parcel and the property owner. You may have multiple utility customers on one parcel or across parcels, so there's issues with that. And then finally, credits and appeals. Should the village offer credits for property owners that take steps to mitigate runoff? That's pretty common. It allows you to, if you don't do that, it looks more like a tax, but if you have some type of credit program that allows a person to actually mitigate their fee. We always emphasize that there should always be some fee, because there's the fixed cost of providing the stormwater system. Because the hypothetical is, well, what if I mitigate all my stormwater? And the reality is that, well, it's the village's benefit for you that there's streets are clean and that there isn't ponding on streets and things of that sort. And we need to be ready in case you can't mitigate all of their stormwater. And then finally, appeals, if somebody has an appeal, how to handle that. So those are some of the administrative policy issues. How we plan on approaching these is have a real high-level study approach overview. And what we're proposing to do is address all of these policy issues and bring them back to you with our recommendations as we go through. But really our first step is to assess the existing stormwater management program. We're about halfway through that, looking at the watershed implementation plan, the master plan, getting a feel for what you're doing today. We will be building a financial model that allows us to look at the level of service, really what it costs you to operate the system. We'll do a fee structure assessment, looking at the various fee structures and doing some benchmarking to provide some best practices within the industry. We'll also be addressing the administration issues, exemptions, credits, appeals, and billing, coming back with recommendations on all of those. And then finally helping with implementation, drafting the ordinance and policies and procedures. And throughout this entire process, we feel that it's real important to be obviously transparent with the public and have public outreach and education. Our plan for that is to, throughout the entire process, be communicating with the public and soliciting input. Some recommended communication vehicles that we would propose is that real soon we have a identification of this study within the village newsletter, let people know, let the citizens know where they can get more information. We'd like to have a dedicated portion of the website to talk about the background, have these presentations, have frequently asked questions. I think that's real important nowadays. We've used online surveys in the past and found that to be real effective. Some of these policy issues, we've actually done online surveys and gotten a fairly good input from the public on those. And then these workshops tonight and in the future we view as very important public outreach and education activities. So to wrap it up again, we will be back at the second meeting in September to talk about level of service. I was saying to Dave that I felt bad that there wasn't as much meat tonight in terms of this presentation as we would like, but there will be tons of meat in the second workshop in terms of what we think the magnitude of the fee is, what you're doing today, what that funding gap would be. And then it gets even meatier, workshop 3, where we look at the fee structures and billing. And then finally, recommendations at the fourth workshop.